Captain is going to be able to be there. and then her voice starts to kind of, we took the sound out, so her mouth is moving, but you're not hearing. And then this music comes in, and that's the cue that used to be the temp cue from that score. It's replaced by something that is not that different. Sometimes you fall in love with the temp music, and but you want to have your own original music. So the composer knew we liked that cue, but didn't want to use exactly that cue. But it was, a good choice in terms of the mood. And so he wrote a cue that was,
it works well.
Similar.
Yeah. All right. We've talked about it. Yeah, sure.
In terms of trying to keep your filming process really independent when you're shooting out, when you shoot in a global setting.
Shoot in a what setting?
When you're out shooting different areas out in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
In terms of different areas around the globe, how do you deal with different influences or people trying to influence maybe what happens depending on where you're shooting, or does that process the influences you find on that, do they help add to what you're doing?
Yeah, it's it's one of those things. But I think the arts is sort of this international language, whether it's great music, great photography, great movies, great paintings. There's just there's something about it that connects people from every different culture. I've been in the most remote place in Indonesia, and I saw one of my movies there. It was Julian's first film about the painter Jon Kilik, and in the middle of the mountains of inner Bali, and there was this little artist community, and I saw this kid, and he's 20 years old, and he just totally related to that film and wanted to be Jean-Michel Basquiat, and didn't speak any English, didn't just I don't know how many movies he saw, or it was that connection that happens no matter where you are or where you come from. And I grow up and see a Ponte Corvo movie or a Sika movie, a Bicycle Thief. I had never been to Italy when I saw the Bicycle Thief, but I could still connect with it just as if it was something that is more immediate than that, because again, the people and the story and the acting and that's the success in good storytelling. And I think that people who work on movies, no matter what country or no matter where they're from, all share that goal, and that is to create good work and connect with it. It's not really about changing the style or we're all trying to make movies that are as good as 1939. It's just trying to find your way through it. There is a bit of a language, a film language, not a spoken language, that any filmmaker is going to bring to it. And sure, it evolves and cutting patterns change and camera and, a style, it gets more contemporary, I guess. But that even seems to evolve globally more, sometimes an individual, this year it's a great movie called The Separation. It could come from anywhere, the next great film. They're just young filmmakers, students around the globe that are all inspired to, tell their story. And they'll find their own way to do it. But, it just transcends borders.
Usually the films that I've seen from you have some sort of social commentary or political agenda. So what did The Hunger Games try to convey, if it did?
Yeah, to me they don't really, the agenda is just to kind of, give an opportunity to reveal something that reflects the world we're living in. And even though The Hunger Games takes place in a pretty distant future when you read it, I think it strikes a nerve in teenagers to adults. People today can relate to it. And I think that's the great success in that movie, that it's about the future, but it's not really science fiction as much as it is allegory for what's happening today. It's just another way of showing where our culture might be going and where it's been. Also, Suzanne Collins was inspired by early Greek mythology and gladiatorial Rome, and she's a child of Vietnam. Her dad was in Vietnam, and she was 12 years old at home and had nightmares about it, whether he was going to come home or not. And when she was writing this, the war in Afghanistan and Iraq on TV all the time, and she's kind of watching that and flipping and reality television and survival, and the whole thing becomes a blur. And that's how the idea started. It was really all of that kind of together, and out came this. So it wasn't just thinking about some kind of futuristic science fiction, but it's completely grounded in her own experiences, and she wanted to make it really it's not about teenagers, it's about war that is through the eyes of teenagers. So I think that's just how it came about, again, with her social messaging that it's just she's a product of these different things that kind of terrorized her as a child, fascinated her as an adult, and she wanted to speak to it.
I read The Hunger Games, and I also seen the movie, and I know that if you probably filmed the entire book, it would have been like a 5-hour movie. So I was wondering how you guys went about thinking about what you were going to cut out and what you were deciding what you would leave in.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and a very tricky thing when it comes to adapting any book to a movie. You've got to not only usually condense it, so you've got to preserve the intent and the integrity of the book, but at the same time you don't have 5 hours. So that's one challenge, is just to condense it in a way that still maintains all the integrity and the core and the truth of the book. And at the same time, you also have to, in the adaptation, it becomes something else. It's now visual work. It's it's not just you're reading the book and it's very personal. It's very much first-person narrative. You're in her head, and it's you experience it that way, and it's very effective that way. But a movie is not in somebody's head. It's got to be through the lens. And so how do you tell that story through pictures and have it still be as immediate and urgent and personal and gripping and first-person narrative? So we had to figure out a way in the camera style, in the editing, in the music, and the sound to have it be just as urgent and immediate and personal an experience, and just as much a first-person narrative as the book is, in order to be successful. So to do that visually, we were constantly kind of trying to find a place where the camera would go without the story falling apart, really. And somebody brought up last night, this is an older guy. I've seen the shaky cam and the moving around the camera, and that's just, it's not my thing. It was a little bit, I wanted to sort it out. I wanted to see where I was. I wanted to get some perspective. I wanted to know the geography. Wanted to see some big wide shots. Everybody is a director. I said, okay, go make your own. But if we had done it that way, it wouldn't have been Katniss's point of view. You know, she's running through the forest, and you're with her. And when she's running through the forest, or when any soldier is in battle and you're in the middle of a jungle, you're at war, it's a blur. It's like the fog of war. You know, you don't know where you are, which direction you're going. You just want to get out of there. And so we had to, you know, come up with a way to, you know, stay true to the story and tell it that way, and stay, you know, in her shoes in order for it to, you know, have the same emotional experience and be as successful as the book. If we had the camera back and we're just showing, you know, everybody kind of going through the, you know, they're running, you know, wide and blah, 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 it just would have taken it away from her point of view, and not, you know, we didn't think it was going to work. You know, we were constantly moving the camera, so, you know, she would do a scene, she'd be sitting there and talking to Rue, or on a, you know, log, and if we were in a normal, you know, lens, normal kind of angle, it just wouldn't, you know, play. But it wasn't until we kind of got right in there that it just felt, you know, more like the book.
You sort of just touched on this, but what was the plan when you went into the Hunger Games and how you were going to film it? And like, obviously it's a major, you know, Hollywood motion picture, very big box office success, but would you say that like the way that you shot it doesn't reflect that sort of Hollywood style?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. You know, we didn't do it with a major Hollywood studio. A lot of the studios, when we took the book around, actually didn't want to do it because they thought that it was, you know, it was about kids killing kids, and that's what they kind of reduced it to. We never saw it that way. We thought it was, again, this experiential thing, and it was, you know, survival. It wasn't about just exploiting death. So we landed with a company that was much smaller and kind of, you know, independent. They released Precious. They released one of the sub companies did Winter's Bone with Jennifer. So they had never done a big, you know, tentpole, you know, commercial Hollywood movie. And if they had, or if we had been with, you know, Fox or Warner Brothers or Universal or Sony, they probably would have paid more attention to that kind of stuff and wanted the big wide shots and the big crane shots and, you know, the conventional kind of things that you do when you're trying to make a big blockbuster. And it's funny because the executive we had at this smaller independent company called me yesterday, and she said all her friends from the other studios, the other executives at the other studios, called her up after they saw the movie and said, I don't know how you did this. If we had, at our studio, allowed these guys to make a movie this way, where the sound drops out and the music is, you know, all different, and there's kind of a lack of conventional continuity, and the shooting style is so indie, and you know, we would have all been fired at Warner Brothers if we let you guys make a franchise film that looks like a little independent film. But it just, the greatest thing about this weekend for me is that it proves that audiences don't have to be fed garbage. It doesn't have to be lowest common denominator. It doesn't have to be just, you know, simplistic, mindless. It could be really sophisticated, which this movie is in terms of the style of filmmaking and the complexity of the sound and the music and the camera work and the acting. It's very deep, and it proves that an audience will come out for that and wants to see something that, you know, is on a higher level. They don't just want some dumbed down, you know, eye candy. And hopefully studios will take note and have a little